Okay, we are on. Welcome to the Finance Committee, March 13th, 2019. We are going to jump right into the agenda. We have with us Stephanie Danielson to present on the District Improvement Financing, also known by the acronym the DIF. So, Stephanie, if you could just take it away.
All right, thank you. So for anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm Stephanie Danielson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town. And as Mark just said, the reason I'm here tonight is I want to talk about the District Improvement Financing Program that is proposed to help pay some of the costs associated with the Five Corners Sewer Project. This is an article that is on the town meeting warrant, and we are certainly seeking support from the Finance Committee for the article. Mark already said this, and it's a mouthful to say, District Improvement Financing all the time, and I'll be referencing it quite a bit through the presentation. I will be using the acronym DIF, but that is what it means for everybody at home, District Improvement Financing. So first, I'm going to explain what a DIF is. Then I'll talk about why the DIF is being considered. And then I'll talk about how a DIF is implemented and the steps that we've taken and that we need to take to get to town meeting. Because in order for a DIF to be actually implemented, it needs to be accepted at town meeting.
Do you know what the percentage of the vote is on that? Whether it's 2/3 or?
It's a majority vote.
Majority vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And that's a good question. But it is a majority vote. Yeah. So district improvement financing is a tool that is used by communities to help pay capital investments that they're making within a defined target growth area. It is authorized under Mass General Law, Chapter 40Q, so it is something that, you know, the state determined was needed to encourage communities to invest in areas that they felt needed some boost for growth and economic development. And what it does is it allows the town to allocate a portion of the tax revenues on new growth assessment that have occurred within a district because of the capital investments the community has made, and take that, that portion of that new growth revenue and set it aside so that it can be used to pay for infrastructure improvement costs. So you identify specific capital investments that you intend to make within the district. Then you determine, based on a projection of what that new growth could be, again, that's occurring as a result of the capital investments that are being made. And then you determine what percentage you feel you want to set aside of that projected growth, growth revenue. So what it also does, another point I want to make, it's important to note that a DIF does not reduce the amount of money going into the general fund. So within a district, what you do is you establish a baseline of current assessment values, and that's your current revenue. And that continues to go into the general fund. It doesn't change that. It doesn't move any of that money into DIF. The only revenue that is put into the DIF program is the revenue that occurs on the new growth assessments. Additionally, when a community adopts a DIF program, and this is kind of important to note, it really communicates broadly that the town is investing in that district, that we feel it's important, we feel it's an area that could benefit from desired growth, and that we're looking for developers to come and invest in the district and bring private dollars to make that investment, that development occur. Like to point out that what a DIF is not, it is not a new tax. This doesn't raise anybody's tax base as a result of the DIF program. It's not a rate increase, it's not a special assessment. And another real important point is it's not a guaranteed revenue stream. So again, it's really dependent on that new growth coming into the district. as a result of the investment that the town is making. So what we're proposing with the DIF, and I'm going to talk about this in a little more detail a little later on, how we got to this point and determined that this was the right mix for the proposed DIF program. But what we're proposing is pledging 50% of that new growth revenue to be set aside to pay for the Five Corners sewer, or a portion of the Five Corners sewer construction project. And then we've also identified some potential future infrastructure projects that we feel would make the district be even more vibrant and kind of achieve the desired vision that everyone in the town and the residents have identified as their long-term view of what the district should be. The commitment is to the sewer project. Those other projects, we're including them because if you don't include those in the program, you can't use DIF funds to pay for them. You can't use DIF funds to pay for other projects. One of the questions raised last night was, well, can you use DIF funds for sewer in another area or infrastructure improvements in another district? The answer is no. Once you've established this program for this particular district, those dollars that you're setting aside from the new growth revenue can only be used for the projects that you've identified for that district. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those projects when we get to that. So I want to move to the why. Why is Easton proposing a DIF district program? And first and foremost, the primary purpose of doing this is to promote economic development within the district. I think everyone knows that Easton does not have a lot of commercial areas. You have your revenue base is primarily residential development, residential properties, so it really focusing on these commercial districts really makes a lot of sense. And this has been a long time in the works. I think you can see it pretty easily up there. As part of that, you know, the major hurdle to new and redevelopment in the Five Corners area, which is the corridor between Bay Road along Foundry Street, between Bay Road and Robert Drive, has been the lack of sufficient wastewater treatment to support any kind of new businesses. And we've been listening and hearing from people who either want to bring a business into the district, like a restaurant, that they just can't do it because they don't have the sewer capacity on site to do that, and that they're missing out on those business opportunities. One of the other things, and in several visioning sessions, they talked about sewering and focusing economic development in this area. Starting in 2007, there was a community visioning session that was held with representatives of a broad base of the community. When we did the Envision Easton Master Plan, we held visioning sessions and focusing on growth and development in the Five Corners area was discussed there. And then more recently, we held, as part of the feasibility study for the DIF project, we held a visioning session in September with property owners and residents from the district. And the town has voted over, let's see, we have 5 town meeting votes to support the sewer project moving forward. During our visioning session in September, people talked about the district being a vibrant, mixed-use, walkable area. They really wanted to connect the residences with the businesses in that district, and also to the recreational areas. You know, the town has 2 beautiful open space areas with the ponds, and people want to connect to that. So that walkability and just feeling like it's more of a neighborhood and less like a commercial center and then a residential center, but just one kind of broad neighborhood, is something that people really desire. So the DIF was seen as a way to offset some of those sewer costs and to help lower the betterment fees that people will be paying. It also provides two other advantages, which I talked about earlier, which is it really demonstrates a commitment from the town to the area and demonstrates that the town, and makes a statement, is going to commit infrastructure improvements there. And it helps make the project more competitive when we're seeking other funding opportunities like the MassWorks grant, which we will apply for again this coming summer when that program opens up again. Okay, here. I'm sorry. There we go. One of the second reasons I just talked about was offsetting the construction costs. You know, this will be coupled with the betterment assessments, general municipal borrowing, mitigation funding, and any other grant funding that comes our way. One of the grant opportunities that we just realized was the community housing, the Community Choice Housing Grant, which is intended to help communities encourage housing opportunities. And we received a $225,000 grant that is going towards the engineering costs, the final engineering costs for the sewer project. So we always are continuing to look for opportunities for grants that will help us with this to help lower some of these costs to the town. And then thirdly, I talked about some of the other projects that are included in the program. Again, these are really potential future projects. The fact that they're in the program does not mean you have to do them. But if they're not in the program, you can't use the DIF dollars to actually help pay for some of these infrastructure costs. And we talked about I talked about the visioning session, where people really envision this being a walkable neighborhood. So some of those projects include might be roadway widening, roadway improvements to help facilitate traffic, to help provide sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and certainly traffic management improvements. So those are also included in the program.
Is that the exhaustive list, Stephanie?
Is this,
What's the question?
Stephanie, is that an exhaustive list of what the other projects are?
yeah, yes.
So it's roadway,
It's roadway wide,
sidewalk, bike lanes?
and we had streetscape improvements too, so it could include things like street lights along the corridor, that, again, both from a safety factor, but also to give it a sense of place and continuity.
Thank you.
And I think I messed up my slideshow, so I'm going to have to start it again, if you'll bear with me. Something's frozen up on me.
Where are the IT guys?
Isn't that on the couch watching
All right,
TV?
I really apologize for the technical difficulties here. I don't know what I did.
Patrick's stuck in New York.
Yeah, he's usually,
He's usually
yeah. Good.
Oh, you mean technologically savvy folks?
Yeah.
Yeah, the IT crew, yeah.
IT guys.
Yeah, you didn't get one with me either.
No, same.
Control Alt Delete.
My kids show me how to use
Yeah.
my cell phone, so.
Hit it with a hammer.
Good.
You don't have to
Maybe
write
someone
tool
from
for
the
job.
community
Right, right.
is
Yeah.
technologically
IT
savvy.
savvy? Jump right in.
Hold on. Oh my, this is embarrassing.
Ooh. We have plenty of time, no worries.
Well, I was gonna say, Stephanie, you're in good company.
I'm usually the one fixing the tech problems. Oh, boy.
We'll give it a little bit of time.
Did you
Well,
come
well,
prepared with
Stephanie-
Oh,
jokes
my
or?
goodness.
I did not.
A question that I'd had on this, and I'm just asking
Oh.
these guys, Stephanie, so if
Yep,
you can ignore me, is the 50% of new revenue, the new revenue calculation is the additional taxes on the degree, on the amount to which things are improved by virtue of the sewer project. Is that correct?
I heard new growth, not necessarily.
It's not taxes,
It's not tax.
growth.
It is
Growth
50%
of
growth revenue.
what?
of the growth,
Revenue.
but gained by the sewer.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, correct.
The
It's over.
It's the tax revenue on the assessment above
Correct.
the base line.
Correct. So
Right.
that's why they do
That's
an
a result
initial.
of
the
new growth.
assessment,
That's
Yeah.
what I'm.
right,
I'm
the
understanding.
assessment on the new growth,
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure that it was
yes.
mentally calculating
Yep.
it correctly.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's an excellent question.
I like when I ask the excellent ones.
Oh, boy.
There are not many.
You good for the night?
Oh, come now. The night is young.
I may have to do this without the slides. I don't,
What works for me is always shutting it down and starting it back up. Have you tried that?
I did, the,
Oh, really?
yeah, I did,
that
but
didn't
that's
work.
not, it's a setting that I'm drawing a blank on. So that I can,
To project, Stephanie, or to actually just have on your own device?
well, so that I can see my notes and you can see the screen.
Can I look?
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to get the presenter view.
The people at home, bear with us.
Good. So you select the presenter view, and it's supposed to detect, and there's a little trick to making it know that there are, this is not it.
Well, I'm thinking,
So you got the
yeah, why, you should be
Why is
fresh
this
with all this,
not-
right?
It's
Fresh
actually
out of
on
college,
share.
come on.
Oh, it's so simple,
Yeah.
and I'm not seeing it. I don't think that's it.
Davis, do you have it on your
where
computer?
I would look.
Right, that's not it.
He's working it behind the scenes right
You
now.
need a kid, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna project this, and we're just gonna go with it. So we're
Do you
not
want to
done.
switch seats with me and present from there so you can see the screen?
I can see it, I'm fine.
You
I can do this,
Okay.
yeah. All right, we'll flip back through these. Okay, so we talked about the primary reason and the secondary reason that we're considering this, and then we talked about the other projects that would be included.
Is this supposed to be on the screen right now?
Not plugged in.
Oh, yeah, I have to plug it
Yep.
back.
That's an easy fix.
That's why
Yeah.
it's not working.
Did it fall out?
No, that was my way of restarting it, and then I didn't put it back in. There we go. All right.
I can
There we go. There we go. Okay. So, how have we gotten to this point? The first step was last May at town meeting. The town voted to appropriate funds to contract with an outside consultant to help us do the feasibility study to determine if we really thought we could generate enough new growth that it would make sense that that new growth revenue would be enough to go forward with the DIF program, and if it would really be significant enough that it could help offset some of the sewer costs and make it worthwhile. In July, we went out with an RFP seeking proposals from various firms, and we contracted with Camoin Associates. They are a highly respected economic development consulting firm that works around the New England area. Through July and October, they did an assessment of the feasibility of establishing the DIF. They did that by doing a market analysis. What kind of businesses, what kind of development would the district be able to attract? What did the competition look like from other communities? And that showed that there was some opportunity in the district for both housing as well as for commercial and businesses. We did the visioning session, which I talked about back in September, which was really well attended. We invited members of the community, property owners, business owners in the district, and had a really good turnout on a Saturday afternoon. And they were very engaged and really talked about what they saw. And it's really nice to hear, because as a planner, you like to talk about walkable neighborhoods and communities. To hear that completely unprompted from the folks that live in the area is very encouraging. And then they did a detailed financial analysis and revenue forecasting. Again, that's a critical part of the process, because you really want to make sure that you know you can reasonably expect to generate the revenue that you're going to be pledging for your projects. They took a very conservative approach, which is what we would want them to do, because again, whether or not you realize that growth, you still have to pay the costs of the infrastructure. And that's an important thing to remember, that it's not a guaranteed revenue. It really is reliant on that new growth occurring. They issued their report and determined that there was sufficient new growth that we could realistically see happening, and that the town should move forward. And part of that projection was based on expressed interest. So we already knew that within the district, the old foundry property had been purchased, and we have a developer who has expressed interest, and at the time he'd expressed interest in developing that site with around 60 residential units that was going to take advantage of the compact neighborhood overlay district zoning that was adopted at town meeting last May. And at this point, the property's been purchased. He's actually getting ready to submit his pre-application to the planning board for that project. And again, we've been hearing from different property owners who have vacant properties, that there are businesses that just want to go in, but they can't because of the lack of sewer, like a coffee shop where the old bank is, and even at the Highland Plaza mall area, they have properties that they had told me they weren't able to readily rent or lease out because they were at capacity, and the types of businesses that were interested just wouldn't be supported. So then that report was presented to the Board of Selectmen on November, and from November through January, we developed the financing program master plan, which documents all the components of the program, including the percentage that's going to be set aside, the different projects that are included in the program, and also talks about how the program will be managed. There will be an annual review of the program, at which point we'll determine how well is it doing. Are we getting in the revenue that we expected to get in? Are we getting in more revenue than we expected?
And just for the committee, the DIF master plan I circulated to you by email, so that was in the materials for tonight. And it's also available to the public on the Easton Town website.
Yes,
So
thank you. Thank you. So another important thing to note is when we do that review, if there's more money coming in than is needed to pay the debt service or the obligations, meet the financial obligations that we've committed to, that money gets swept back into the general fund. So it does, it can be used in the general fund as well. I do want to emphasize, on the other hand, if we don't realize that, then those obligations need to be met with general fund money. We presented that master plan to the Board of Selectmen in February, and now we are out conducting our public meeting sessions and meeting with other boards to present the program, help people understand what it is, and again, seek your support for moving the program forward at town meeting. So where we're at right now, we had our first real public session last night, went very well attended. It was really targeted towards members, towards property owners within the district who are actually going to be assessed the betterment cost. We had a lot of questions, a lot of good feedback, and heard a lot of their concerns, but also really heard about their support for the program as well. We're going to have our second public meeting on April 4th, and that will be done in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen's meeting. And we'll get details out to everyone, but we've booked the high school, the Richardson Olmsted Auditorium, Cafetorium for that session. The Board of Selectmen are expected to do a final review and to vote to accept the master plan, and then to suggest that it be adopted at town meeting to support it on April 29th. So just a quick summary. The Five Corners Sewer and Economic Development Planning has been underway for more than a decade, much longer than that. The DIF has been explored for over a year. We've been working on this for quite a while now, with the feasibility study conducted in 2018, concluding that it's a reasonable expectation that this will work for the town. It's a revenue tool. It's not a guaranteed revenue source. Any borrowing the town plans to finance with the DIF must be funded regardless of whether there's new growth or not. The DIF identifies a portion of future growth. So that means that the other 50% of that new growth will go into the general fund. So it's not like this program is taking all that new growth and using it for infrastructure in the district. We're proposing 50%. The other 50% goes in the general fund. And as I mentioned earlier, if there's excess beyond what the town is obligated to pay off, that money will get swept back into the general fund on an annual basis. It represents an investment in buy-in from the town, that commitment to the district. It also improves our standing for grant applications. It could reduce the estimated benefits, betterments for the Five Corners Sewer Project. And growth contingent, it could provide additional funding sources for other infrastructure projects that have been identified in the program. And we're going to town meeting on May 20th, hopefully to get it adopted. So that's the end of my formal presentation.
Was there a slide on the dollar amount, the 14.2 million, that broke that down?
Yes, I didn't, I don't know if I included that, hold on. That's betterment, that's not that slide.
I might be looking at it as well, I'm just not seeing it, but is there an end date or an expiry date to this?
It is a 30-year program.
Thank you.
I don't have that slide, but it was, the projection was that we could realistically, year over year, over the 30-year period, realize $7 million, $7.2 million, $14.2 million, and 7.1
In it right now, if you
million would
want.
be the 50%.
Okay.
That's over, I know you just said, but that's over what time
A
frame?
30-year time period.
So, just so I can put this together in my mind, Camoin, did they come up with the 14.2 million?
That was the projection, the new
Okay.
growth.
So they projected 14.2 million in potential new growth over 30 years.
Yes.
And did they make a recommendation on the percentage, the 50-50 split, or was that done here?
They made that recommendation based on conversations.
So they did make a recommendation on the 50-50 split.
Yes, but
Okay.
that was something that, in conversations with the town administrator and the town accountant, that we felt that would be what we could realistically tolerate.
Right. I mean, because from my understanding, there's an important element that you did say, but I want to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so it's $14.2 million, and the town goes out and they borrow that $14.2 million after the project starts, or between now and as the project is continuing, if this is approved. And now the town's on the hook for that 14.2 million. And so if the revenue is not, it does not actually get to 14.2 million, the additional revenue, the town still has to pay that 50% towards the betterment that it commits to now. So if it comes in less, it comes out of the general fund. So there's a risk involved for the town, correct?
Right.
So I
And I want to use, it's, because it's 50%, it would be the 7.1 million. It
Right.
wouldn't be 14.2 million.
But I think that it's important to note that in considering this, because some people might say, well, why can't it be 75%? Well,
Right.
then the liability is larger on the town.
Correct.
So this is a balance, from my understanding, this 50% number. Okay, and is that number gonna change, or is that 50%? Is that a hard 50 right now?
It's a hard 50.
Okay.
And again, it's for, fiscal responsibility,
Yep.
which I think is what you're
Mhm.
saying, that looking at, one, it's a projection. We can't predict that this is going to happen, that we
Right.
are going to realize $14 million.
Right.
It's a realistic projection based on what we know today
Mhm.
and based on the interest that's been expressed and what we could anticipate just with, so it looks at potential new projects, including the Foundry Site project, including some potential other residential projects that could occur within the district. And then it looks at, okay, we have some vacant sites like the bank building and what could feasibly happen there.
Mhm.
And we know, we have a high degree of confidence something will happen there because we've been in communication with that property owner for several years now. And he's had potential buyers or lessors that are interested in the property, but they want to bring a coffee shop. They want to
Mhm.
bring a small restaurant there, and you just can't do it with the current on-site septic system. So it's a very realistic
Mhm.
and responsible projection, but to be very fiscally responsible, we're saying 50%
Mhm.
of that
Mhm.
projected new growth revenue is really what we want to commit to. And the town has they voted to appropriate funds for the project. This will help reduce the betterment cost
Mhm.
to the homeowners.
If the revenues exceed 14.2 million, or start to look like they're going to exceed 14.2 million,
And 7.1 at the 50%.
yeah,
I'm
will
gonna-
that 7.1 remain?
Right. So the 14 million would be the revenue of projected new growth.
Mhm.
And
Not
the diff
actual.
is talking about 50% of that, so that would be the 7.1.
Okay.
But so you're asking if the growth exceeded that?
If the growth exceeded that, will the 7.1 grow in,
Yes,
in relation to the, the higher number?
yes, because it'll be 50%
Okay.
of that amount. So 50% of that new growth would go into the DIF program.
Mhm.
Okay? Then that annual review, we'd look at that and say, how much of that do we need to meet the obligations that the town has pledged these funds to?
So there will be annual reviews.
Annual reviews. And if it's more than we need to meet that obligation, a small amount may be kept in reserve just in case we hit a lean year the next year.
Right.
But the rest will be swept back into the general fund.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then at some point, let's say year over year, we continue to see significant growth beyond what we anticipated. Then we could even go to town meeting and amend the program to reduce the percentage,
Mhm.
so that you're just automatically moving what would be that excess amount
And there
into
could
the
be an
general
effort to
fund.
increase the percentage too.
Yes, yes,
Both
because that's
ways.
the flip side of
Either
it,
way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But if it doesn't bring in the anticipated 14 million, it's not, we would never owe more than the 50%.
And again, the 14 million is the projected new
Projected.
growth amount
Right.
of tax revenue, but the 50% would be the 7.1.
Right, so
So-
say it was 10 that came in, not 14,
Right,
You're still on the hook
You're
for the
s-
7.
you're always on the hook for the 7.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yep,
So it's a delicate
Mhm.
balance.
right.
Yeah.
Right, so in that case, so let's say your new growth didn't hit 14 million, it only hit 10 million, you're going to take 50% of that, that's only 5. The tax, the
Mhm.
revenue on the 5. And again, that 7 million is is the total at the end
Mhm.
of the 30-year period. But, so your amount coming in is, let's say it's 263,000, that's around what you'd be getting of 50%. And it's less than that payment. You could go back and you could amend to increase the percentage.
Okay.
So you're taking more of that new growth revenue.
Okay. Now, when would it take effect? Because all this new growth revenue, I assume, is not just going to happen immediately. There's going to,
Right.
that's
It's
time. So at what point do we need to start paying at that 50%?
It would be immediately because the town is gonna borrow the money
Right, so we're
to
locked
acquire this DIF program, so you're locked in out of the gate.
right away. So then I guess, what were when they were discussing the projections of that 14 million in new growth, over what time frame were they talking?
30 years.
So
It's
So
over
we
30, but I
put-
think your question is, at what
Then
point
say-
do we
at what
At what
point do you
point-
start
thank you. Yeah.
realizing?
Do we break even? and
Yeah,
then start
where
to
do we-
see-
Do we
where do
make
we
a year
come-
one
Do you s-
investment of $1 million and we may hopefully make it back up by year, 20, 30?
Sure, but,
What are the cash flows, I guess is the fundamental
Right.
question.
question is, did they look at, well, yes, by year 3, most,
They did do a ramp.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
they
That's what
looked
I'm
at a
asking.
projection of, when would you expect to get that?
do we have that in the,
It's in the feasibility study. And the numbers that they used in that were based on the prior assessment rate.
thank you. I have the full document up here. Thank you.
Yeah.
For-
Are you looking in the master plan or in the feasibility study? Okay, page 20.
I don't see it on 24.
Yeah, it's on page 23.
Yep.
So you can see in end of fiscal year 2021,
Yeah,
the projection would be 54,000, and then it increases up until you hit 2025. And these numbers are really, they're just based on the projected new development,
Mhm.
the new development they've projected that we could realize. This could be more. I mean, if there's more growth in the district than what we are anticipating right
conservative
now,
approach.
right, then you'd be getting more in.
Are we,
But if you get less, there'd be less coming in.
would we be pledging a fixed dollar amount to improvement, or would we be, I'm not clear for pledging a percentage. In other words, if we pledge the 7.1 million based on the estimate, but we increase the total tax revenues from improvements by, I don't know, 30 million. So now it would jump to 15 million. Is it 15 million that's now going into the diff, or is it stops at the
No,
original 7.1 that was pledged?
You're pledging a percentage, not a dollar figure, not a set
So
dollar
all
amount. That's
the-
one way of doing it. In this case, it was decided to use a percentage. So you would be pledging, in that instance, in the final analysis at the end of 30 years, if you had realized $30 million in new growth, you would have swept into the diff account 15 million.
But that can change at a town meeting, so if we prefer.
That's why there's annual reviews, because
Right.
you start to see patterns and trajectories.
And you would, what you
That
would
committee
do
before
is,
then, we could change the numbers based on the.
that's right. So annually, you'd look at that and you'd say, well, this is more than what we projected and we pledged to pay down. So you're pledging 50% of that new growth, but you know what your obligation is, that portion is being based on what you're anticipating receiving in the diff. So again, if you're meeting that or exceeding that with the diff amount, you can then go in and amend it. And the excess will be swept into the general fund.
Is our responsibility during the ramp up the same as it is at 2025? So at 2021, are we responsible for the same amount of payment at 2025?
I'm not the accountant. I think the short answer is yes, the amortization schedule, I think it's, the principal versus the interest that,
Must we allocate or appropriate money for projects beforehand? In other words, could we say that we're going to appropriate monies based on how well the diff is funded?
I think the answer to your question is yes, but could you ask it again?
Yeah, ask it again a different way.
Yeah, I think I know
If-
what you're asking.
What I'm asking is, let's say at some point we decide we're going to pledge, we're going to use diff money to buy down the assessments that are made for people to put in the betterments that people have to pay. And we say we're going to put $1 million towards that. We're now on the hook for $1 million. No matter what, somewhere the town needs to come up with $1 million. Ideally, it will come out of a well-funded diff, but let's say we turn around and say, okay, we're going to fund the diff according to a 50% schedule. And after there's $1 million in there, we'll get together and say, as a community, let's appropriate the diff. Let's appropriate $1 million toward whatever the diff is approved for.
One of those other projects.
Yeah, or the initial whatever it is. Can we decide to appropriate the money after it's made enough? I'm asking because I'm deeply concerned that we assume we're going to get a certain amount of betterment and a certain amount of new revenue. We don't. And now the town, which is facing a structural revenue deficit, needs to come up with more to fund something.
Again, the DIF program allows you to either, one, you can either say, we're going to set aside a dollar amount of new revenue. So if that amount comes in, that's what we're going to put into the fund. It will be a set dollar amount, or you can do a percentage. Then, how you pay, you can either issue bonds or debt for your projects and use the DIF revenue to pay the debt service, to pay off the debt, your obligation, or you can do what they call a pay-as-you-go. And you can move your money into, the DIF money can go into what they call a project cost account. And that money then goes to pay the project. So you accumulate money in that, and then you pay. Oh, we've got enough to do the sidewalk project, or we have enough to do what other project. That was not the option that was chosen here, I think in part because in order to help lower the betterment cost, you really have to kind of project what amount of money are we going to take out of that total amount that is making up the individual betterment unit cost.
Sure, and please don't take my question to mean that I think it's the wrong way to do it, so much as
No, I'm trying to answer.
Trying to weigh the risk
Right.
to the
Right.
town. So
Right.
if we say we're gonna put $7.1 million to defray the betterment costs,
Right.
that's great,
Right.
unless we find out 10 years in we've raised all of
Yeah.
whatever
So-
less in new revenue, and now the town that's struggling to do so many things is saying, well, we've got to keep paying into the betterment fund
Right.
because we're signed up for it and committed.
Yeah, I think if all you were doing with the DIF program was to do the other project improvements, the traffic, and, the roadway improvements, the sidewalks, streetscape, those type of things, that I don't know that it's a better option, but I think that would be more suited towards the pay-as-you-go option. I think because a part of the reason for doing this is to help ease some of the pressure on the betterments. At some point, we need to know how much we're going to pull out of that or pay with the DIF, so that you know how much you're going to reduce that by, because after the project is done, then you have to set you have to finalize what that betterment is going to be. So it doesn't lend itself to the pay-as-you-go.
And
Understood.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
So
off.
I mean, it's a
Understand.
very good question and a valid concern. And then what I wanted to say is, so, and because it is a valid concern, it is a risk, that was the reason we took a very conservative approach on the new growth projections, and in only committing to 50% of the new growth revenue.
Which I'm understanding, unless I'm hearing this wrong, is the promise of the 7 million, the 50% of the projected. So if we're looking at June 2021, you're looking at 54,000 projected. So if we're giving 50% of that, that's, let's say for easy math, 25,000. Where is that other $6+ million going to come from?
It's going to come from the general fund for the initial debt payments.
We're borrowed against it, so it exists.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Like, that's been accounted for. You know what I mean?
yeah. So it's not coming out, being promised? When you're saying it's already accounted for?
Well, if this
In what
plan is
sense?
adopted,
Right.
we get the 14.2. We borrowed the 14.2 to pay this off. So,
Right.
I mean, you can't
So
look at
it's
it
not
year over
coming up,
year.
yeah,
You have
so
to
it's
look
not
at
like
it
it's coming off of
extrapolated over
anything
30.
else. Okay.
And how that, and again, I'm not the accountant, but, Wendy is very, so the plans for payment will take into consideration the ramp up.
Right, 100%,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
I have another question. Grants on this that would go towards the betterment. How long can we seek out grants towards the betterment? can we do it for years and continually try and get that betterment cost down for these
Oh, that's a good question.
these folks at home? Is there a stop period where it's like we're not
My
going to
unders-
chase grants for this
So
project
my
anymore?
understanding, we can continue to apply if there are grants that are available for this type of project. We will apply through the construction period.
Mhm.
So as long as we can, we will apply for any grants like the MassWorks grant. My understanding is at the end of the project, and I don't think we'd get grants after the fact because usually they're for the construction. They don't come in afterwards and say, oh, you did a wonderful job, we're going to give you money
Okay, so
for
once
that.
the project's complete, you don't apply for any more grants?
Right.
Okay. That, and I want people to be clear, and it's not, I'm sure the people in this room understand, but for the people at home, it's Article 17, I believe, if it's not approved at town meeting, then the diff completely just evaporates and the project continues and the betterment costs are at their full price. If the diff is approved at town meeting, there is some relief to anticipated relief. Well, no, it's not just anticipated relief. There will be relief because the town's on the hook, no matter what, for that $7.1 million. So that relief is guaranteed, actually. Whether it's realized or not, the town is still on the hook. And that's why that's such a delicate balance of, do you go beyond 50%? Where are you at that number? So there is risk on behalf of the town, and that risk guarantees some form of relief to the residents who have to pay for this betterment.
Are we allocating? Muted myself. How are we allocating the relief, the betterment relief?
Stephanie, do you know? Where's it going to sit?
Who receives it?
That's a
To-
great question.
To what degree? Is it need-based? Is it every parcel
No,
land
it
gets
would
the
be,
same amount?
no, it would
Is
be applied to the way the betterment works, and I'm not the betterment expert, but you take the total cost of the project that you're going to better to the property owners. And then the way we're doing it is a single betterment unit. So you divide it, and the single betterment units are generally based on what the flow would be for a single-family home. And you determine how many betterment units, single betterment units, every property is going to incur. So, for example, a single-family home certainly is going to use a lot less water and generate a lot less flow than a restaurant, like a 150-seat restaurant. So based on kind of that flow rate, they'll determine how many betterment units a restaurant will get, and they'll determine how many betterment units are applied to each property. So then you know your total betterment units, and you divide the cost by the total betterment units to come up with the single betterment cost. So then what you'll do is, with the diff, you'll take the anticipated diff new growth
Additional, yeah.
revenue, and you'll subtract that from that total cost, and that will be what you use to calculate your single betterment unit. So everyone in the district would benefit. It wouldn't be,
So the more betterment
Need-based.
units you have, the
the more you're going to pay in betterment, yes.
also but comparing it to the no diff option, the less you'll pay with the diff.
As an example,
Yes,
right now, as it
yes.
sits with no diff, the average residence will pay $28,000 to $32,000 for the betterment.
Right.
If this diff goes through, the goal is to bring it closer to $25,000. So that difference is the relief.
Are we locked into that methodology? My reason for asking is one of the primary concerns is that a resident is paying a lot that they would struggle to pay versus a restaurant that would be a for-profit enterprise and maybe could afford more. for their betterment.
I think the methodology that exists has accounted for that. You know, there are commercial properties that their fees are over $1 million.
Well, because they're
Like a
generating,
restaurant,
they're
somebody
generating
uses
more
a lot of
flow,
water. Yeah,
so, right.
it's relative to the use.
It's really
But
right.
that has been taken into account.
Right, that's in the betterment unit calculation, which I understand. What I'm saying is that what we're doing is we're applying
I
the
see what you're
diff.
saying.
We're applying
Can
the
the diff
diff
only
to the
applies to
whole
residents and
amount.
not commercial? Is
That
kind of in
is
a roundabout
another
way?
way of doing it.
Is
Another
that
way-
what you're asking?
That's the essence of what I'm saying. It's
Okay,
not
so
exactly
can we
it,
take
but
the
it's
diff and
close enough.
only apply it to residents and leave out commercial? I don't believe at this stage of the game it's written
Yeah,
that way.
and again, I'm not here to talk about the betterments. I
Yeah.
don't know the level of detail. I know that the method that we're using is legally sound, and it is one that's used frequently for infrastructure projects, especially like sewer projects. And it is, I don't know, but I would imagine it needs to be equitable. And it is the same method that was used for the Queesit Commercial District as well as the village.
I also want to point out that
Costs were a little different with the village, but that it was a much smaller project too.
there's a neighborhood association that is fairly large. Hundreds of residents have grouped together with businesses in support of this diff, you know, to help
Sure.
provide relief. But my point is that businesses and neighborhood people have aligned and they're working together. So I can't speak for them, but I don't know if they would be in favor of dividing that because there's a fracture and, you know, the people.
And my reason for asking was just simply, is it locked in
Hypothetically.
is the warrant this distribution scheme? If it is, the
Yes.
question's moot, so.
I can't say with absolute certainty. I believe so, and we can reach out to Connor tomorrow,
Yeah, no,
or Mike, and
The impression
ask
I'm
that
getting is
question.
that it is.
yeah. I mean, we're so
That's
far
what
into
I
this.
think.
But again,
But-
if you asked me about my life on it, I couldn't.
Yeah, and again, I think that is
Which
is
is
I don't
really
want-
a
that's why I
betterment.
I'm
wanna
not trying to derail it, just
Oh, no.
understand it.
Yeah, I think that's a
Now, an
really a
important
betterment question, because I think it's whatever you reduce the total cost by, which is what the intent of the diff is to reduce the total cost.
Got it.
That it has to be spread equally across the property owners. That there has to be, I believe there has to be an equitable method, but, and that's what this
Would
one
make
is.
sense.
Yes. So the consequences of this not passing a town meeting means this just goes away, and everybody who's in that district pays the full amount. So, more questions while you have the chance? This is an article we are going to have to recommend between now and probably the next month. Definitely not tonight. It's, you know, something people should think about, sleep on, research, talk to people. This neighborhood association actually has a website, I believe.
Yep.
A very professional website, very
And-
well
and-
done.
Is it a neighborhood
know it?
website or they have a website in regards to this?
It's a website in regards to this.
Oh, okay.
It's a website in regards to this in support of this, because without this, they have no relief.
So it has both residential and commercial. The website is both. It's not just residential.
It's the
It's
association.
the property
No.
owners, it's a
I
property.
don't know it off the
right.
top of my head. I'll email it to the group though,
Yeah,
because they've done a lot of work and
curious.
I mean,
I
what you'll
personally
find is more
support
of the
this diff.
local business owners are participating in, certainly like Phillips Edison is a large corporation, but, yeah, we'll send you I don't have it memorized. It's
yeah, no, I don't have it
Foundry
memorized, but-
Village,
Be
This-
curious to look at it.
Neighborhood Collaborative, but I don't, they've got an abbreviation for the website, the
Okay.
URL.
But this diff was, Connor and other people here, they brought this to the forefront. It wasn't discovered by other people, so they're in support of it. I believe the Board of Selectmen is in support of it. We don't see their recommendation, but there is support for it, not against it. And again, the way it's constructed, there has to be that delicate balance as discussed. So, that's the big piece to consider.
And if you have other questions that you'd like us to answer, or, you want us to come back and talk, please let us know, and we'll
Anybody have any
certainly try
questions?
to accommodate that.
Stephanie? No? Okay, that was relatively painless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. We
Okay,
appreciate it.
you're welcome.
And just as a reminder, there's another public meeting on April the 4th. Is that correct?
Yes.
April the 4th
Yes.
with the Board of Selectmen at the Richard Olmsted Cafetorium. For then, public are invited to participate in the
Yes,
event, of course.
yes, we will be sending out, we'll be broadcasting it through the town crier, on the town website through the news item. We'll probably do a press release.
I believe it'll probably be on ECAT. Last night's meeting was on ECAT.
Yes.
I believe this one will be on ECAT.
Yes, probably, yes. And it will be in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen's meeting, so it will be like a joint.
Mhm.
Very good.
I'd recommend that anyone here, if you're not going to watch it at home, or if you can't attend it, I'd watch it. So when we do make a recommendation, it's a very educated recommendation, because hearing from those people who are in this district, it's really compelling. It's really compelling, and you know, you have to empathize a little bit. So
Absolutely.
I'd encourage
I
everybody to.
don't live in that district, I'd want to hear what they have
Yeah.
to say, because that's a huge impact
Yeah.
on a
And
family,
they
so.
see angles, and they have thoughts that you know I didn't consider, because
Mhm.
when it's very personal to you, you see things that other people don't.
And Stephanie, we should let you go, but this is more for this group, but isn't it too that for the folks that live there, the impact, with or without the diff, the benefit is that the cost of a failed septic out of pocket is huge versus if you have a low interest loan over the course of the 25 or 30 years. So it's almost like, yes, your neighbors might have failed and yours hasn't yet, and it's either a waiting game if we know it's a high rate of
Right.
failure. So I think that group, right, has already come together and said, okay, this sewer project, yes, it's going to cost the betterment, you know, whether it's $25,000, $28,000, or $32,000, but there's an opportunity now to do this, and this is why we want to do it. That's number one. The next piece is, does the diff, you know, benefit us? Which I think for that group, we see
I
it
think
does,
it's worth
right?
Yeah.
Because for them, it's
taking the risk
potential.
for what they're contributing
be
to the betterment
$7,000.
of the whole community.
Right.
It could be 25% for them.
But you know, and you also have to consider there are some people that just put in a septic. They're not going to need one for 30 years,
That's a good
but
point.
they're going to pay for one.
That's a good
There are
point.
people who have maybe an older septic, but it's in perfect working order. They have absolutely no need to tie in. And also, after the betterment comes in, they still have to pay to tie into their home. So in addition
An
to
additional
that.
cost, yeah.
So this, you know, to them, it's not just the 25,000, which is over 30 years, which is at lower interest, I think 4%.
Isn't it like something like 15,000 to tie in or something, 12, 15?
Depending upon the
feel like I
length
heard
between
that.
your home and the street,
Yeah.
it varies. But there are additional costs they will incur after this fact. And some of them, you know, if my septic was in failure, this would be a blessing.
Oh, yeah.
But very few people are in that position. I'm sure there might be some, but just hearing all the different sides of the equation, it's, you know, I feel for these people,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah,
if
I
we
guess
can provide relief.
I was under the impression too, the rate of failures was very high in the area. But to your point, if I just put a new septic in last year
Yeah.
to the tune of $20,000,
So,
it's a little tough to swallow.
yeah, something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roberta,
Thank
you'll,
you.
you'll send us that email? Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, on to our next item on the agenda, number 2. Wow, might be a long night. Budget and departmental review update. We didn't get new numbers. They don't always come out every month. It's been a busy month for Wendy, so we're going to skip over that. Reports from other boards and committees. I always love to start down here.
I actually have one.
Oh, wow.
Keep muting myself.
Clip it on and let it go.
So the mumbling under your breath, the
Well, yeah,
angry
it's-
mumbling, it doesn't get caught on camera?
Exactly. I feel like I'm gonna like sneeze or like all of a sudden everyone at home's gonna get like an explosive noise, so I keep muting it. But yes, a brief budget subcommittee meeting. We met last week. Dr. Cabral shared her draft budget presentation and we got some good information from that. We talked about the budget subcommittee building our own presentation for the upcoming meetings, on joint meetings with the budget. We settled on an overall focus for that. I will come back in just a moment to Dr. Cabral's. We settled on an overall focus for this rather than going deep and having the budget subcommittee try to dig deep into all the potential topics out there. We said, let's just give the overview, the big picture, to inform the rest of the discussion and allow the individual departments to focus on details of their own budget presentations. And we determined the presenters for that. Going back to where I started with Dr. Cabral's presentation, a very clear theme emerged from it, where we talked about our town's ongoing structural revenue deficit, and talked about that deficit to the degree to which Tom described it as, at this point, almost wallpaper, where we've dug into every possible source of revenue and every possible source of cost avoidance that we possibly can, to realize that what we have is unambiguously structural, and all expressed a fear that that's becoming so much of a mantra that we almost stop thinking about it. That was the backdrop to Dr. Cabral's presentation. What she emphasized in hers is that her expected, and again, we're all working through this now, trying to deal with the level service budgets and bring them into alignment with what we expect our revenues will be. Her expected 2020 budget will be in what she has previously defined as somewhere between the reactive and the regressive phases. For those who don't remember, she's built a good chart to give a picture to the town of her budget priorities, where at the top of it you have strategic. Those are the things that are the things that the educational community, that the professionals who do education for a living say, if you're going to be a good, modern, capable district and deliver on what you're supposed to deliver on, what parents would expect their children to have, what a community would expect their students to have, you would achieve these strategic things. Underneath it, she has, and apologies to Dr. Cabral if I'm getting any of these details wrong. This comes from my own notes. Underneath that, for slightly less money, is the proactive. That's the school committee saying, if we spend this money, we're pretty sure we're going to be out in front of those things that are going to become requirements sooner or later. Things that are going to be legally required. We have to do them. Think of things like all-day kindergarten, which we don't do right now. We're one of the last few school districts that don't offer that. But we're pretty sure that the Commonwealth over the next 10 years is going to say one day, you're all required to offer it. Go now. And then there's reactive and essential. That's saying, let's do the level service things that we have and respond to the legal obligations that we're required to. Beneath that is regressive. Regressive is when we start to say, let's reduce services, let's lay off staff and educators, and bring things smaller in order to balance our budget. Her prediction, as I understood it from our budget subcommittee meeting, and again, this is all draft. All right, so I'm not trying to back anybody into a corner or make a statement that goes beyond that. This is what I took away from that, is that we're straddling that reactive and regressive right now, is where they're expecting that they're going to come in. We may lose some things, we may just maintain some things. We'll see how that goes. Again, apologies because this is alarmist. I want to apologize if I'm saying anything that I'm getting incorrect from the notes that I took in that meeting. But that's where we are. Obviously, all of that is a concern. I raised at the meeting in some back and forth that just for example, to drive home the point of where we are, we tend to look at, well, at least we're at that reactive level, at least we're doing what we need to do and we can breathe easy. To put it in perspective, the sorts of things that we have at the very highest level for strategic are things like adequate nursing in the schools. So we're not talking about making massive investments in new areas of education. We're talking about things that, to me, I would look at and say, gosh, I thought we were doing that.
Basic necessity, yeah.
That's our
we're- that we're
strategic,
running
that's our
extremely
aspiration
lean on.
right now as a community, is that we, among many, many other things that are on her chart, which I'm sure she'll present.
To have adequate nursing staff.
Right, and I use that as an
Right.
example to illustrate a point. There are other things in there that are more what I think people would consider strategic. So it's not just nurses. One comment that came out of this when we were looking at the comps that we have done with other districts, similar school districts, similar communities to ours, is that the delta between this reactive or aggressive and what it would take to do all the things up through the strategic, the things that our educators say we ought to be doing, is roughly $5 million. That's the difference where we are. So honestly, I walked out of that budget subcommittee meeting struck by the
An additional
challenges
$5 million
above where we are.
to be at what stage?
Strategic.
Okay.
Okay.
Doesn't seem like a lot of money.
So that's what we're facing. I walked out of there with a sense that what we have is achievable, but also frankly a sense of alarm that comes with honestly being a parent in the community.
An update for the committee too, we have scheduled now the budget hearing schedule, where we, with the Board of Selectmen, will hear from the various department heads who will present to us their budgets, their proposed budgets. And Dr. Cabral will be with us. Monday, March 25th is the first, and Wednesday, March 27th is the second. So it's a Monday and a Wednesday. I'll send that schedule out to you. Both meetings start at 6:30 at Frothingham Hall, again, open to the public. Easton Public Schools, Dr. Cabral will be presenting on that first Monday along with the assessors, IT, inspectional services, and the town clerk is that first Monday. Okay, so we will hear directly from
Exactly.
Dr.
Yep.
Cabral. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't mean to jump in, but if I could, I actually wanted to, since you opened the door there, keep walking on. So I met with Dr. Cabral, actually both superintendents this month, in regards to the upcoming budget, and you're spot on with a lot of the stuff. We had a similar conversation, I think, and we were able to kind of go through it piece by piece. There's a lot on the plate, as you were saying. I think we got a long way to go before we get there. So there's also her budget proposal that she gave to the school committee was presented on 3/7. I think that's on ECAT, where she goes through a nice slideshow and presents everything. So it's something, if you haven't seen it, it's a longer meeting. I think when I watched it, it was about 2.5 hours because it's the budget meeting, so they usually go a little longer. I asked her some questions on what are the big tickets, what are the red flags that we're seeing here. The biggest one that we were talking about was facilities.
The what?
Facilities.
Okay.
Yes.
So out of the operating budget, usually the school in the past, you haven't seen too many capital budget requests. They usually kind of take care of things within their own budget, those kinds of things. However, due to the increase in facility repair and maintenance, we're starting to see capital requests. I'm sure you've seen those as well. I don't want to steal your thunder on the committee, but you're seeing things like roofing, boilers, these kinds of things. And I can tell you, just from my experience,
Were they mostly from the elementary?
mostly elementary, yeah, you're seeing a lot of elementary stuff. So, just being in the buildings myself, I've seen these boilers, and I was actually talking with Dr. Cabral about it. So we use the boiler at Parkview as a teaching tool to
Yeah.
the new fire guys when they come in, like, look at this thing. You're not gonna see these parts. You're not gonna see these pieces. Like, it looks like a steam engine down there.
I did a tour
It's
of
incredible.
Parkview for the school planning committee, and part of the tour was to go in and look at those boilers. And
Yeah.
it looks like it's out of the 1940s.
I've been in the center school one,
It's-
it's pretty
I
frightening
took
too.
pictures of it to show people at work, to say,
Yeah.
you gotta see what's in this basement. I mean, it's archaic.
So we're looking at facility
Pretty
costs,
bad.
and some of the big ticket ones were, the RO roof was 22 years old.
Wow.
It's 22 years old, and it was a 20-year roof. I've been on the roof many times. I can tell you it's a rubber roof. I used to do roofing too. And rubber roofs are just hard, dirty, nasty work that's not cheap. So that's one of the things we got to look at there. But it's also the roof. If you don't fix that, you run into a million other problems. The boilers were another one, but for a general base repair costs, not including improving any programs in the school, just to repair the buildings, air quality, windows, asbestos abatement, piping, those kinds of things. An estimate that was done by two different companies came out at $86 million. And that's over including like, swapping building space to do the construction, those kinds of things. But that's for Center Park Human Road.
Right, through, yeah.
Those
That
things.
came out in our meeting as
Yeah,
well.
that was a big number. I expected a big number, but 86 million, I was comfortable. That's
Yeah.
a big number. And then we can
So
compare
is that
that.
something that would be imminent or could be held off if we are moving forward with the center school project?
I think there's immediate repairs that have to be done. We're looking at like roofing. You have to have heat. You have to have a roof. Those are kinds of things you have to have. I think the other cost we're looking at is things to get within ADA compliance, wheelchair lifts.
Right.
Those kinds of things are expensive, but you have to have them.
You have to have them.
And the problem is there are thresholds, so once you pass a certain point, you have to replace more than just your repair, you have to replace the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the problem with the boiler is you're looking at a boiler, well, is it cheaper to buy the parts to repair these
Right.
boilers when these boilers are 40 years old? You gotta
Mhm.
find the part, find the guy who can actually work on it, who's licensed to do so. It's an occurrence, so,
I think a lot of how we handle that moving forward will be determined based off of the center
The
school
school
project.
project, yeah, that's what I
If-
thought.
If that goes forward, then it's, all hands on deck to make everything limp across the finish line.
Yeah. very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
I thought that's where we were at with,
It is where
let's
we're
hope,
at.
because I know
We're-
center's on
we
the
are
backup
limping and we're
boilers, so
patching
just
into
fingers
it now.
crossed and
Yeah.
say a prayer or something that it doesn't,
Yeah.
We talked about that for 2 years, right?
yeah.
So, full-time kindergarten you brought up, I know that's a question I get from a lot of people. We're expanding the town growth is going up, which is great. So we're starting to see some town growth going up. A lot of younger families coming in. I think the concern is, where we don't have full-time kindergarten now, as we start projecting forward as these families grow, we're gonna be looking for these programs. And, she shows a map in her slideshow, I just showed you where you can see the surrounding communities, who covers it and who doesn't. And the map is, starting to show Easton pretty red and clear right in the middle there that we're.
We stand out on that map.
Yeah, we stand out. Projected costs would be about $700,000 to $800,000 per year. And I think included in her strategic goals, let me double check that, is implementing 5 years as taking some of the tuition-based teachers and making them into the regular budget. So instead of getting hit all the time, because once the state mandates it, it's gonna be, boom, we're there, now you gotta cover the whole cost. I think Dr. Corral's plan, and wisely so, is to start incorporating those costs in that. So start moving tuition teachers into full-time positions over the next 5 years, so instead of incurring a large cost, we can start getting that cost little by little.
Did she, how far off was she from a balanced budget?
So we're looking at, if we do the bare bones, we're looking at, I think, 3.01%, and that's the borderline regressive. And I'm gonna expand, I don't wanna keep this here all night, because this is a big one.
Yeah,
But-
and she's gonna present on her own. Right.
But I wanna hit you guys with what the reality of the regressive is. So 3.03% would be getting us to that. What that does is it gives us the increase on the basics, like the contractual agreements that we have, the union agreements that went through, legal fees, transportation contracts, those kinds of things, the things that we can't change.
Mhm.
Those are set in stone.
Timothy, what about the charter school? The costs that we continue to incur, those are going up.
Yeah, that's going
That's
up.
a big one.
And the other problem is state aid is, so the state aid, I'm learning a lot about this because there's so many different formulas. I don't know how these superintendents keep track of all the formulas. But the foundation funding that we get for students is based on all these different factors. One is growth, one is income. are doing such a good job that it reduces our grants because we're getting high marks. We also have good property values because of how we take care of our community, and we have, all these things are really good. But because of that, the per student cost increase, because the town looks at, the state will look at us and say, look how good you guys are doing, you don't need as much money. So those are kind of things that we're putting into these calculations. So just in order to keep the doors open and everything running, do contractual agreements, we still have to make some cuts to the budget. And that's where the kind of things kind of get, well, these are projected cuts, I should say. So the projected cuts come in the form of, without getting into too much detail, but possibly not filling attrition spots for teachers, custodial positions, and those kinds of things. So there would be, and I think there would also be possible layoffs of 2 positions. So there's personnel cuts, which is costly. It gets us a little bit more money into the budget, but it also does increase classroom sizes and those kinds of things. What she's proposed, she believes is absorbable. It's not like we're going to have 47 kids in a kindergarten class, but it's still going to be an increase, and that's always a concern. And so it's kind of a question: is that yes, we're still in the allowable ranges, but is that where we want to be as a community? And that's why you kind of have to decide if it's worth the money that way. So that's the 3.03%, and then per pupil costs are around 13,433. The other, so I talked a little bit about the grants because we're doing well. We start losing grant money as state aid. The other problem is there's a fund called Circuit Breaker, and that's our special education. And this is something that we receive a percentage of reimbursables through. It's at 72% right now, but they're talking about reducing that next even further down to 65%. And that would be a pretty nasty hit for us. It hasn't happened yet, and I think there's some efforts to lobby, the state and Senate on that, but that's something that could possibly happen too. So there's a lot of things that are possible that aren't the best. We've also we also made some gains in the term of some tough decisions in the past. We had to increase activity fees, sports fees, and those kinds of things brought in those revenues that helped to offset these costs. But again, that all came at a cost for the school system too. So those are always hard things. I know one that was tough was seeing the special education vans go. It was something that we had to do, financially, but that's a tough one to explain to special education families that you get somebody you have a relationship with and your special education child has a relationship with. So those are tough decisions. Luckily, we don't have any of those going on, but we're still looking at some pretty big cuts. The percentages to go up to some of the more proactive and strategic, like Mike explained. If we did the proactive ones, which would get us into including So proactive would get us into more adjustment counselors, pathway internships, full day free kindergarten planning, SRO, some computer science technology things. We had to make some cuts to some of the technology issues going on there. That would be an increase of 6.324%. And then if we meet the strategic, that's a 9.4. That's roughly the $5 million somebody was talking about. So the Dr. Barala set a initial goal of 2.75% as a level budget. As they sit right now with potential cuts and the increased revenue from those other streams, it was sitting at 3.03. So it's going to be a tight one. And that's assuming everything changes. Stays the same, it doesn't change. The other factor to this is the state can change requirements. If they do change a requirement, like they say, hey, you need this many language teachers.
Right, specialists for this, right.
Or whatever, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and then you run into a whole new issue because now you're looking at, well, now we have another cut to make and we have to fill that spot. So she's gonna go over the full list of everything with us in 2 weeks. This is available online, and like I said, it was the March 7th meeting. There's also gonna be a public hearing on March 28th at 6:30. Simmons Lecture Hall, to, whether, the school committee's gonna review this again, and then recommend to,
Balance it. Yeah, they have to.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that'll be on, March 20th at 6:30.
Okay.
Very good, thanks.
Excellent.
Also,
Can we do the VOTEC one as well, or?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I would just, jumping in, the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has published the school and district report cards. West Paulson got an email
I read
today
through that
with a
today.
hyperlink letting
Yeah.
us know that, the report has been published. I'm happy to share that link with all of you. But, interesting to note, just in this public report, our school, just at OA now, this isn't elementary and the middle school, but it looks like just at OA, that total dollars spent per student is $12,152, compared to our district at $12,686. And then across the state of Massachusetts, $15,450 per student. So despite our very high grades on this report card, we're doing it very economically, very efficiently, and is a testament, like you said, Tim, to the professionals who work in the school systems and the work that we're doing with our kids. So proud of that information, but still, wouldn't it be nice for us to be able to provide the basic, recommendations and services that a town like ours should be aspiring to.
The other meeting I had was with,
Thank you.
Superintendent Lopez over at the Southeastern Regional. Again, another incredible superintendent. The amount of formulas that you guys go through is absolutely wild. So the school committee there has requested the town minimum again. They usually do that, so it's about every year for us. They're very kind about that. Enrollment is 85 students. It's going to increase by 1 student next year.
Okay.
So I heard that and I was like, fantastic, that's gonna be good. Now, there's a couple caveats with this though, because of everything that's going on, right? So, the estimated is $1,179,066 compared to last year at $1,132,709, increase of 4%, which is kind of what we were projecting, originally anyway. It's an increase of $46,000, so I'm like, why does one student cost $46,000? That's a lot of money. But again, it goes down to the entire formula. So because of the formulary changes of our good scoring, property values, income values, the per pupil rate went up $387. So the entire equation goes up, which increases that $46,000. So it's not one pupil that costs $46,000, it's the entire calculation. Yeah, it's kind of,
Okay.
so even though the town's growing, our student population has descended a little bit, which also is added in there too. But that's kind of where we stand there. But both those, 4% I believe is what we had already looked at, in the overall budget for, the VOTEC. We can always, I was kind of hoping it would come in a little under so we can try to chip off that, 1.2 million gap we're looking at, but, as of yet, that's kind of where we're at.
Roberta.
We did not have an audit subcommittee, we won't have another, I think, for another few months.
Okay. I'm on the school planning committee, and I was not able to attend our last meeting. Patrick is also on, but he's not here. So I will. Our next meeting though is March 26th. And
The school planning?
yes, school planning committee. And
Busy week.
yeah, 3 days in a row for me. I'll see my kids Sunday and then Thursday, I guess. Yeah, March 26th is the next meeting there, and there'll be something to report on afterwards. Stephanie?
No committees.
Stephanie, have you had an opportunity to meet with your department heads this
Uh-huh.
year? You
Yep.
have? Excellent.
Do you want me? I have really great notes at home, but I came right from work, but I can probably do most of it off the top of my head if you want.
Go for it, yeah.
Just give us a quick snapshot.
Yeah, Kristen is fantastic. I really like dealing with her. She's so good at what she does.
Remind the committee who
So
Kristen is.
we've got, she is the director of Health Human Services. So I've got Veteran Services, I've got all of the Frothingham Hall stuff, this,
We have inspectional services,
inspectional
Board of
services,
Health,
Board of
Council on
Health,
Aging,
thank you.
Veterans Department, Recreation.
Yep.
Good
So
cluster.
it's a good cluster, it's a good group.
Happy group.
There are going to be some what look like alarming changes. She will explain them away when she speaks to everyone, but because they're rolling, the biggest change is that they're rolling over the costs of operating Frothingham Hall into her budget. And it
Okay.
wasn't that way before, so it looks like this crazy increase that it's just moving.
Where did it come from before?
It was being funded, I don't know by whom off the top of my head before. I have it jotted down on my notes at home. But, so they're just moving it over onto her budget, so you'll see that. So it looks like this very large increase, but it's really kind of not. It's just changing where it's getting, moving. So things are pretty much the same. I've got great details that I can fill you guys in on at our next meeting when
Okay.
I bring my notes with me, as far as new changes, things they're doing, things that the veteran service officer in particular was doing. I got some really great stories of ways they found they saved us $20,000+ a year. This new veteran service officer seems to really be doing his job well, because he had, I can share a brief story, brought in this, there's a family that the town was funding, I want to say off the top of my head, it was something like $25,000 or $22,000 a year. And they pulled this person aside and said, what's going on, and why aren't we working? What can we do to help you? How can we service you? They were able to direct this family to a bunch of VA services that they were entitled to as a veteran that they didn't know about, which pulled them off of getting funds from the town at all, and now they're getting the proper services they needed through the VA benefits, and so huge savings. That they're really good in that whole group of finding money and ways to move things around. They run on a pretty, skeleton budget. They rarely increase anything, if at all. The increase they were looking for was nominal. I want to say off the top of my head, $700 total. And that was for training for staff. She's got a young, hungry, eager to learn group of staff. And so they had attended some different trainings. There was a really great one that was put on by the Mass Bar that they did. And she got a great deal. She was able to negotiate the attorney rate, which was like $30 for the course that she was able to send people to. I mean, it's such a small amount of money that it was crazy. Yeah, it's such a slight increase. Everything else is pretty much status quo. I've got 2 pages of notes
Okay.
from our chat that I will bring with me when I go home before I come to the next meeting and give you a lot more details.
Nice, and when the department
So-
head is doing her presentation, which I believe is gonna be on the Wednesday, the 27th.
Yeah, and she had confirmed.
They have the right questions.
Yeah.
And do their.
And she confirmed with me that she will be explaining to everyone that large change because of the funding of
Yes.
Frothingham Hall, which, so
Sure,
it's
she
going to
will.
look alarming, and she'll have all the explanations and the breakdowns of that with her at that time.
Connor and Wendy will be there, so we'll know
To
which
explain
line items and
where it
where
was coming from, yeah.
came from. So very good, thanks, Stephanie.
You got it.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Down the line we go.
Nope,
Davis.
no committees.
Cool, so the capital planning committee met on February 26th, and we went over the capital requests for the assessors, for health and community services, for the public schools, and for DPW. So that was a big one, a lot of pages of stuff. But to just kind of hit the highlights, Department of Public Works, most of their expenses are for new vehicles. They, kind of have a way that they try to
Mhm.
rotate their fleet.
Yeah, they stagger it.
Yeah. And so, and after that, their next big one is pavement management road funding, and then a couple other items that are just, ADA transition plan, health and safety program, stuff like that. All in all, their capital budget requests come up to 1.7 million. The public schools, like Tim was talking about, their big one that they're requesting is the EPDM roof on RO, that rubber roof. They had the cost estimated at $600,000. Their next big priority was to replace the synthetic turf and the track up at the stadium at the high school. I think that's another one that's kind of coming towards the end of its useful life, and they're
Mhm.
looking to try to get a new one in before it's starts costing more and more to replace it. So their requests come out to a total of just over 1 million.
For a new field?
For everything.
Okay.
The field itself is 185,000, and that's just what they're asking from the town. The full cost is more than that, but they think that they can cover a good chunk of it with like private fundraising,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So they're trying to, kind of make us do the least work
Mhm.
that they can. So DPW, they just had an additional request, very relevant to what we were talking about. A septic tank failed up over downstream of the Northeastern Village wastewater treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
Not a great place to have a septic tank burst, and so they were looking for $54,000 just as a new request that they submitted for 2020 in order to fix it. I think that last time we met, I had just come off of their full presentation, so there are other things they're asking for. This was just a new one that they had presented to us.
Does that have any emergency associated with that?
Let me see.
I think they took it
Or
offline.
urgency? I know, because you're saying it's in 2020, so did we,
I have the memorandum right in front of me.
Leaking.
Yes, they took
That's
it
what I thought, the
offline,
leaking one,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that-
yeah.
But they're gonna need it back
Well,
online
yeah.
soon.
Yeah. Making sure I was thinking of the right thing.
What's it servicing?
I believe the Northeastern Sewer District,
Just that,
you know the mound?
yeah.
Downtown by the water.
There was one, I can't speak technically to it, I'll butcher it. And I don't wanna mess it up because there's a lot of people concerned about it and I don't wanna say something that is completely wrong.
Right.
But that's the area, there was a failure there, and it needs to be repaired, because it's broken up by maybe into like 3 tanks, so one of the tanks they can take offline.
I think you're right. Yeah, I just have the very brief memorandum, but yeah. So that was just their additional request. So I guess not emergency in the sense that like bad things are actively happening, but definitely falls under the category of
Let's get
you should take
yes.
care of
It
it
needs to
sooner
get done,
rather than-
yeah.
Yeah.
No warranties or anything, I mean, that was put in, what, 5 years
It's
ago?
It was
Pretty new.
Failed already?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if they factored that
Okay.
in or not.
We'll definitely ask in the future meetings, because,
Certainly. The assessors, like when I met with Robbie Alford, their one request was a car for the department, which is $26,000, which means it's just enough that they, needed to make a capital budget request. And then the health and community services, they basically want to get a natural gas generator as a backup for Frothingham Hall. So what Kristen was basically describing was Frothingham Hall has kind of become, a good kind of like emergency location, for when people lose power, when people need cooling in the summer, stuff like that. And basically what they want to safeguard against is, if for some reason there was a power outage and there were lots of people using Frothingham Hall, and then part of the electric grid also took out Frothingham Hall's power, then that would kind of cast a lot of people into uncertainty as to what they could do. So they're putting in a request for $50,000 for an emergency generator. I think she said it'll last like 20 or something years. It'll be kind of, a once and then hopefully you can forget about it for a while expense. And I think that was
It was
basically.
used as a shelter for about 2 or 3 days last year.
Yeah. And they run a ton of senior programming out of there. They do some really cool stuff.
Is that the CERT team using that as
Yes.
well?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
use it all the time.
Yeah.
Davis, I have a question on the
It's
tax
often.
assessor car request, and I think we brought this up last time.
Uh,
Is he given mileage for driving his personal vehicle now? Or is it as part of his job description, is it expected within his salary that he provide his own transportation?
I think it's the second one. I think it's.
Okay,
as
so,
it's set up now, it's as an expectation.
yeah, as a stipend, so I mean, I would think if that's gonna be, if that were to be approved, or if it would be carried in the budget, then where does it come off on the other side? 'Cause
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You
So.
were compensated for this,
Mhm.
so now, you know, there has to be a balance. is what I'm
Right.
saying.
I don't know the specifics, but that's
Okay.
something we can,
Okay.
we can clarify. Because I know that as of right now, there isn't like he doesn't receive a stipend of any kind.
Right, but you know, oftentimes they include that in your job description,
Sure.
the expectation,
Sure.
and sometimes your own transportation is in your job description. And if that's in his job description, and we're removing that from part of his job description, then you're,
See the salary reduction.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's got to be fair and equitable.
Yeah, I do know that it's not just him, it's also, I know that his staff also have to, use their own vehicles, and they share a vehicle with one of the other departments, I can't
I
think
recall
of.
you saying that last time, yeah.
Mhm.
But it's only it's like
Mm-hmm.
afternoons of every other, day or something like
Right,
that.
and only during a period of time where there's a lot of assessing going on.
Right, yeah,
I
exactly.
think it's what, like a 3-month period or a 4-month period?
I think he does the bulk of the work
Mm.
in a 3 or 4 month. I think it's generally year round, but
Mhm.
a lot of it comes.
Right.
So that's his big request. Yeah, we can definitely get more answers about
Yeah.
how, because obviously, it has to have been thought of before, that
Yeah,
this is-
and there has to be a balance. And
yeah.
I mean, is there a reason why he doesn't have a car? Why do we have a tax assessor who drives around in his own vehicle? I mean, that has to have been thought of. Maybe it's the optics of a person driving around in a tax-funded vehicle to tax you more is not the greatest idea. So,
It's
I
never,
don't know,
it's
it's
never just the
speculation,
purchase
but
of a car, it's
there
the
has to
fuel,
be a
it's the
reason
maintenance,
why
there's
it
other
exists
stuff
the way
too.
it exists.
Sure.
And I just want to know why.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, very fair. So yeah, those were all the ones we had presented to us. At this point, now we've had all the departments present their requests to us. So moving forward, now we're just going to be coordinating with Wendy and we're going to start voting on stuff.
Excellent.
And I don't know off the top of my head, I don't think Wendy's set the schedule yet, but that'll be coming up the next month or so.
The new vehicle for DPW, was that part of the capital planning anyway? The big master plan, the 5-year plan for capital planning?
For their fleet replacement stuff?
Yeah,
I believe so, yeah. I think
so
that
the
they,
new ones that you're adding in here would be the septic, the roof, and the assessor car, because the car I don't think had been.
Those were the
previously
large ones. It's not all
proposed.
of them.
yeah, so the car is the only one for the assessors. The roof is the big one for the school, but
And
they
that's
have,
new, we've never seen that
Mm.
before.
I think they technically put it on in 2014, is what's listed as
Wow.
their initial inclusion date. That roof has been a thorn in our side for a long time. I don't remember if you guys, I don't know if you guys would have been, attentive back when the decision was first made to use that kind of rubber roofing, but it's kind of been one of those omnipresent things that has had some problems in the past, and now we're getting towards the end of its lifespan, like Tim was saying, and
Yeah.
Ignoring it could cause more damage
exactly
than just the roof.
Roofs
Right.
are generally
They're very important for the structure, for the
I'm
entire
just trying
structure.
to discern what's showing up as new versus anticipated
Sure.
already in years past.
Sure. Yeah, if you give me 1 second. So, DPW, all of their big stuff, like the fleet replacement, they basically try to put the same number out every year, is my understanding, because, kind of the same way that the police department has their, they try to do 3 in, 3 out.
Yeah.
That's what DPW tries to do. So I think that they're technically new in the sense that they wouldn't have been on last year's capital request.
Sure, but
but
in the map, in
The number in the grand scheme of things is more or less
Okay,
the same. For the schools, the roof, their initial inclusion date was 2014, and for the track, the initial inclusion date was 2016. Other than that, the kind of smaller items, backup battery packs, regular replacements of computers and projectors, those are all kind of cyclical.
Mhm.
yeah.
It helped me understand how I've never, in all my time here, I've never been on the capital planning. When people put things on, like in 2014 and 2016, does it go onto a list, and as you pick things off the top of the list and it kind of moves up and it's always moving when, priority comes along. Is that, it sounds like that's how it works.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm trying to find a good example in my list of papers. So like, if you want to look at this, this is the one for the school. Basically, each year, all the stuff that didn't get funded, they stick it back on and include that column of the initial date they put it on.
Yep.
And so, ultimately the
That
committee-
illustrates.
yeah, ultimately
point.
the committee decides what gets funded, and so we have this big master list.
Now, I have a question as
Yeah.
well. So the roof, for example, was put on this list in 2014. The estimate is 600,000. Is that 600,000 in 2014 dollars or 2019 dollars?
That's 2019.
Okay, so
I think they have it out to bid already. They said there's, knock on wood, there's a chance it might come in under, around 5, so.
But yeah, so if you ever want to look at that, I can send it over. But yeah, basically, this is kind of how each department does it. They say, here are the things that we've been asking for. Here's how long ago we asked for them. Here's the stuff we also added onto it this year, and then ultimately it's up to the committee to kind of, triage and figure out, what's the most
Priorities.
important to get done. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Tim, you already went, so I believe that brings us to our next item on the agenda, review and approve minutes from February 13th. So that was our last meeting. Did everybody have a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Anybody need to make changes or make a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstention? One abstention. Okay, committee member comments.
Just a reminder again that for the schedule, it's going to be March 25 and March 27, 6:30 at Frothingham. And we'll circulate information as it's available and pertains to that. We've got the warrant articles, the draft warrant articles. I don't know if I circulated those. I think they were delivered directly to you from Lisa Florio earlier today. So, but I will recirculate that with a reminder as usual in time for that meeting.
And I believe our next scheduled meeting beyond the 2 meetings at the end of March is the first Wednesday in April, second Wednesday in April. And then it's going to be immediately after that. I anticipate in April there being 2 to 3 meetings because we have to bring some people in for them to explain their budgets a little bit, and then some time to deliberate on the articles and the agenda, on the warrant, and then make recommendations. So I plan on April and May having at least 2 meetings per month. One of the months might be 3.
Do you have any other tentative dates, or?
I don't.
Okay.
I think April, I don't know what the first Wednesday in April is, but on
10th.
that date, we should probably
The first or
determine-
the second? Sorry, the first is the
Second.
third. Second is the 10th.
So on the 10th of April, what we should probably all do collectively is put together a schedule between that date and town meeting, which is on May 20.
Yep.
So we'll get a hard schedule on April 10th, projecting through May 20.
Okay.
Community, sorry.
One more, there was the Town of Easton Boards and Committees newsletter, I believe again was circulated to everyone. There were a few important dates in there, including certainly the annual town election on Tuesday, April 23rd. We have one of the candidates for our FinCom here with us tonight, Amy, in the audience, so we welcome Emily. Thank you and good luck to you. Educational opportunities, State Ethics Commission, there's some training opportunities at 1 Ashburton Place at the state office, March 28th or May 30th, if you're interested in participating and learning more about state ethics, open meeting law, training, April 25th, and again, just some open meeting law reminders and other compliance schedules are in that newsletter, so I encourage you to take a look at them, just do some research or training yourself so you can have those requirements.
And April 4th is that DIF meeting, the next community DIF meeting, which will be at Richardson, Olmsted, at 6:30, April 4th. And that brings us to community participation. Thank you, Stephanie Danielson, for your presentation tonight, very informative. And thank you to the audience for participating, or being present. We already covered our upcoming meeting schedule, and brings us to our last item. Anybody want to go at it?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Okay. Adjourned.
Quick question on the April and May additional dates. Wednesdays, you thinking?
Always Wednesday.
We usually do it Wednesday.
I'm just,
Yeah,
schedules.
they're